Split step, move, balance, quicker. These are just some commands that I used to shout at players for years. I believed every time a player made a mistake, it had to do with their movement. They didn't split step at the right time. They weren't dynamic enough, or they were just being plain old lazy. But believe it or not, that style of coaching just didn't work. If anything, it made it worse. But I truly believed I was trying to help. But what I found was players didn't move more efficiently and effectively. They just tried to move a little bit quicker. But more often than not, they moved at the wrong time. You see, movement isn't about effort, it's about information. And that's why each and every Monday, I send out information to tennis coaches around the world in my newsletter. If you'd like to get insights, experience, and some of my best practice designs, make sure you subscribe by using the link down below. So here are 5 lessons I've learned when coaching movement. Lesson number 1, shout and split step feels right, but often fails. It's easy to see when we believe a player hasn't performed a perfect split step. So we shout out the command split step when we believe as the coach is the right time to perform the action. But we have to understand that the player does not react to a verbal instruction when they play tennis. They perceive information from the environment in front of them. By shouting out a verbal command, we are actually getting the player to be attuned or bring their attention to information that isn't actually available during the match. By shouting out split step, move your feet, now, racket back, these are all explicit commands that the player will get used to, and they'll use it as information of when to move. But if that information is not available in the match, the player will not be able to link the action to the perception. Lesson number 2, movement is a response, not a drill. So in lesson 1, we talked about information. Information the player needs to know when to move their feet. When, in this case, to split step. That information generally comes from the far end. The player needs to be aware and bring their attention to their opponent. When their opponent is about to strike the ball, ideally is a time when they have to split step. But we also have to understand that sometimes players might not have the time or need to split step. For example, at mini red, players generally don't need to split step because the ball is slow, the court is small, and the players at this stage are not very athletic and dynamic. They can get away with not split stepping. There's also times where the player has been late onto the ball and they're late reading the information. Therefore, they won't have time to split step. So by trying to get them to perform a very complex and dynamic move like a split step, we may actually be making things wrong. We need to bring our players' attention to the information that's important. In this case, it's not what we see, but what the player sees. Lesson number 3, so how do I coach the split step without explicitly coaching it? Well, there's multiple ways in which we can do it. Generally speaking, a split step is needed to cover a big distance. We need a very explosive first step to cover quite a lot of ground in a very short amount of time. So I would place my players in very strange and weird positions that will allow them to explore a split step within context. So this very easy example is I just start the returner out of position. The returner can move once the server throws the ball up. Because the returner has such little time, they're probably going to have to perform a split step in order to cover the distance. Again, what I'm trying to do here is bring context and information to the movement. Lesson number 4, don't coach the feet, coach the focus. Again, a big part of this is not actually coaching the footwork. Footwork will actually emerge in a natural manner. Now, as a tennis coach, your job may be to guide the player towards a solution. You may encourage them to explore, can they transfer their weight from their heels to their toes? Can they explore getting their weight moving from left to right? And you can do this for your practice design. You have to try and avoid is try to coach movement in isolation. Things like running around cones, running through ladders are really good to develop speed and agility, but they do not transfer onto a tennis court. Why? The information is different. A player gets really good at running through a ladder because the information they use is the ladder. When the ladder is not available, players will use different information. That's why you very rarely see a player perform an icky shuffle. If you are going to develop a player's movement, you have to do it within the context of the game. Try not to isolate it and decompose it by getting players to run round cones or run through ladders. And lesson number 5, here's a real example from my court. If I want to improve my players' speed, agility, and their balance and their overall movement, I would just manipulate the constraints. A really simple one is tramlines are in. If I want my player to work on moving out wide and being strong in the corners, I'll make the court bigger. This is now going to force the player to develop a more explosive first step, work on their speed and their agility, and their balance and beat and the bounce. By exploring or exploiting a bigger court space, it's going to force the players into developing more efficient, effective footwork. Now, this is all dependent on the level of the player, and the scaling and the size of the court is really dependent on the players you're working with. But you have to explore players covering different amount of space using different footwork patterns. Movement is not conducted by instruction. It emerges through information in the environment. Please check out the video on the screen now where I'll show you how I developed the serve via play.